Thank you all for joining us today. Last year, we did a panel on the issue of water, and it's obviously so important with the continuing drought. We are coming back with this excellent panel here today. This is one where we are literally all in the same boat. We're all in this together, and I thank you for joining us. Water is a precious resource. It is a shared resource. And it's something that for the good of us all and for the good of future generations, we have to be good stewards. We have to use it wisely. We have to plan and think about not only this generation, but what are we leaving for the next generation? And since it's a finite resource, we need to think about innovation and what are we doing differently? And all those topics we'll discuss today. So before I start, I wanted to introduce briefly our panelists. We'll talk more when they start, but this is who we have with us. First of all, Chris Churchnell. He's the Deputy Director for Integrated Watershed Management at DWR. Nusha Ajami, who may be familiar to some of you, Chief Development Officer now for Research in Earth and Environmental Sciences area at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. And Aaron Tartovsky. Aaron is the co-founder and CEO of Epic Clean Tech, a water technology startup based in San Francisco that was named a world-changing idea by Fast Company magazine. It's Tartakovsky. Sorry, I know Aaron well, and I should get the name right. Hopefully that I did that time. So I'm going to make some brief remarks, and after that, we'll hear from each of our panelists. We'll do really different segments with each one of them, and then try to bring everyone back together. At the end, we did reserve an hour and a half for those who can stay with us, and of course, we'll have a recording available as well. Little history: we've been experiencing the worst drought in California's history, more than 1,200 years. We're seeing less participation than in average years and more extreme wet when it does rain. So we've got what we call some people climate whiplash, actually. So hotter and drier weather patterns with more extreme participation when it does rain. And unless we cut our greenhouse gas emissions, which I am very much working diligently at in Sacramento, we'll still see significant increases in temperatures. Those are expected to be the norm. And all these changes will, of course, affect water supply, water quality, and critical habitat for our species. We have multiple fish species that are currently on the verge of extinction. We're seeing impacts here, heat impacts, and this week is a very good example that we haven't seen before. Little stat about existing conditions in terms of water use. We use 82 million acre feet of water in California in an average year. Urban areas use about 9 million of that, about 10% total precipitation. Agriculture uses 34 million acre feet, or about 40% of that. And the environment captures about another 39 million acre feet. So about 50% of it flows back to sea and our ground basins. And acre feet is equivalent to about 325,900 gallons of water, or depth about 1 inch of water on 1 acre. Sorry, 1 foot of water, acre on water on 1 acre. We are in a drought, and therefore we are seeing conservation happening. Most of San Mateo County has voluntary cutbacks. Santa Clara County, and I represent both counties, has mandatory cutbacks. We all love to be able to turn on the faucet, and we take these things for granted. And could things change so much that one day that is not a given for us here in the Bay Area? And how does one plan for such extremes? So that's really what we're going to be discussing today. For those who joined us last year, you may recall that the system that we use locally is linear. That's kind of how we refer to it with Dr. Jami, really in her words. Most of our water comes down for the Sierra Nevada mountains in a complicated engineering web with reservoirs and groundwater providing our water. In San Mateo County, in some of Santa Clara County, it's a Hetch Hetchy system, while other parts of Santa Clara County get water from the reservoir system, plus the state and federal water systems. Then we use it to brush our teeth, wash our hands, etc. And then it goes down the drain, is cleaned and sent back to the ocean. And when we talked last year, we said there's a lot of fluff in the current system. That's a word that that Dr. Jami's used and I've repeated. And so when we talk about things like desalination, which I'm sure will come up, always comes up in questions, we say, yeah, in the future, that's certainly something to look at, but there's a lot of fluff in our current system that we need to really should address first. And that's why I believe it's time to heavily invest in water reuse and recycling, which is one of our major themes here today. These projects can be expensive, as we'll learn. There's things we can do now for buildings that were on an individual building basis and project basis, but many of the larger projects take 10 to 30 years to implement. And there are 8 such large projects happening in the Bay Area now. And so that's what I love when I think about being a good steward, when I think about my time in office, it's really that thinking beyond the things that we put in place today that are not going to be helpful even in my term often. It could be 10, 20, 30 years, but these are the kinds of decisions we have to make now, or otherwise we'll suffer the consequences down the road. So our water agencies are collaborating on reuse and recycling projects in San Mateo County. Bosca, the Silicon Valley Clean Water, Redwood City, Cal Water, SFPUC, and other wastewater providers are working on MOU to study regional potable reuse opportunities. Santa Clara County, the Valley Water is working to meet a goal of 10% reuse, and agreements with Palo Alto Mountain View to treat wastewater and expand the development of purified water for potable reuse. And in 2020, approved a design, build, finance, operate process to deliver purified water from recycled water treatment plant via pipe to groundwater recharge ponds in Los Gatos. In South San Francisco, Orange Park is the first stormwater capture project in San Mateo County that was just completed a few months ago. And that means 240 million acre feet, or again, about 78 million gallons going back into the Colma Creek groundwater per year, and 15 million gallons per year into irrigating of sports fields and roadways from recycled water, therefore offsetting potable water. So that'll say about $140 million annually in the city's drinking water usage. What am I doing? What are we doing in the state Senate on these challenges? Well, the biggest thing we can do is provide money for some of these projects. And along with the governor, I supported $880 million to continue current year's water resilience package and add an additional $750 million for drought response. The 21-22 budget package included an agreement to provide $4.6 billion across 3 years for water activities, including $3.3 billion in the current year. So we're taking this obviously very seriously, which the level of seriousness it deserves, and have $750 million for grants to water agencies to implement residential, commercial, and agricultural water efficiency projects. So I wanted to run through some of that for you because people do ask to say, what are you doing at the state Senate level? What are we doing to fund these projects that we know are expensive? So with that, I want to go to our first panelist, Chris Churchnell, as I mentioned, Deputy Director for Integrated Watershed Management. He's responsible for advancing policies and programs that integrate and provide really multiple benefits, including flood management, local water supply, and ecosystem restoration. He's working statewide on the drought response and reuse and recycling projects that the state is involved throughout California. So, Chris, thank you. I wanted to welcome you here today. Thanks for being here. In the interest of time, why don't you go right into the presentation you have for us, and then I'll ask you some of my own questions, then questions that we got from all of you who submitted them in advance.
Okay, wonderful. Senator Becker, folks who are tuning in today, staff and others, it's a pleasure to be here. It really is. I don't get to do this type of a town hall event often enough, so I really appreciate the invitation. And I just want to touch briefly before I go into some of my comments, Senator. You mentioned, your answer to the question of, so what are you doing? What is the California State Legislature doing? And I just want to really underscore that with your leadership and others with whom you work, both the Senate and the Assembly, and working really closely with the administration, of course, for whom I work, are taking extraordinary steps to address the current drought. And honestly, in doing so, helping us prepare best for the future droughts that we know are certainly coming. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for inviting me here today to give some brief remarks and my perspective, at least a window into that perspective from where I sit. It's a pleasure. So again, thanks. And my name is Christopher Chernell, Deputy Director for Integrated Watershed Management at the California Department of Water Resources. We're one of several state agencies that are charged really with really stewardship of statewide water resources. We are generally a non-regulatory agency, paired very closely with the more regulatory focused State Water Resources Control Board. And together with some of our other sister agencies, we do a lot of work in the water sector, really closely working with a lot of the local water agencies, a couple of which you, Senator Becker, just mentioned, that serve your constituents and the region. So state of California's water, certainly a big topic. And also, as Senator Becker, you mentioned, the extreme heat wave, the heat dome, as it's being called in the newspapers and beyond right now, are certainly an indication that drought is the most significant presenting and pressing challenge that's in front of us today. And that's really what we're here to talk about. A couple of things come to mind, just to put this into a little bit of context, and you, Senator, already did a great job of starting that conversation. I'll just build on it a little bit. So we're currently in the third year of a very deep and widespread drought. It truly is affecting every corner of our state. And for a little bit of context, our state is 100 million acres large. It's a lot of acreage. And there really is not a square inch of that 100 million acres that is not affected currently by the extreme drought conditions. Yes, there are gradations. Yes, there are local differences. It is a big state, a big geography to cover and make generalizations about, but you can certainly say that there's not any part of the state that's not currently feeling the effects of the current hydrologic conditions. This is the third such drought so far in the 21st century. I note that because really, if that trend continues at that frequency, that is notably more frequent than what we experienced generally in the 20th century, so the last 100 years. So an acceleration, apparently, of this type of deep multi-year drought. Statewide reservoir storage, so really looking across the regions in the state, where are, on average, the surface water storage reservoirs or how are they doing, rather? They are at roughly, on average, 68% of average storage for this time of the year. So 68%, not a good number of average heading into continued dry months ahead. We expect certainly to be continued dry months ahead. It has been worse in the past, but it is definitely a sobering number amongst other statistics that are similar. Related to below ground storage, while groundwater basins are basically and generally on a better long-term trajectory, given action that the state legislature and the administration took a number of years ago related to regulating groundwater basins, they are in a better place than they have been, again, looking long-term, but certainly that they continue to see groundwater overdraft in certain parts of the state, in particular in the Central Valley, really that central corridor, lower elevation part of the state in the middle part there. And what that looks like in a lot of places, unfortunately, is continued land subsidence, where literally the extraction of groundwater allows soils to be compacted and we lose elevation permanently. So really interesting geographic human influence change that is in part linked to continued drought conditions. Pretty sobering stuff. Fish and wildlife. Certainly terrestrial species are impacted by the drought conditions, lots of habitat being impacted, stresses being put on our terrestrial species, but also aquatic species, of course. So those that depend on our freshwater systems in particular, as streams and rivers dwindle, there's a lot of stress put on fish species, especially some of those iconic endangered species like salmon. And if you pay attention to Delta region topics, the Delta smelt and others, that are important indicators of larger environmental health, certainly put under increased stress by the current drought. And then communities, of course. So thinking about the smaller and oftentimes more rural communities across the state, of which we have over 4,000 townships and small communities as we define them. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, an alarming number of them, are experiencing their drinking water wells that are generally relatively shallow wells going dry this year. There's obvious water supply implications to those wells going dry, but that can also sometimes exacerbate water quality challenges that those communities already face. So again, water supply challenges in some of our more vulnerable, small and more rural communities. Larger urban communities that might be more familiar to the folks on the phone today, thinking about the cities that are in your Senate District number 13, Senator Becker, and the Peninsula and South Bay regions, typically less vulnerable, I would say, to multi-year droughts like the one we're experiencing. And that's generally due to several factors. Typically, because of the larger ratepayer base in those larger urban communities, there's generally more robust and redundant water supply infrastructure. That could be less dependency on only a single particular source of water, so a more diversified water supply portfolio. And also, there's very specific state laws and compliance with those state laws related to requiring really in-depth multi-year drought contingency planning at that local level. So there are state laws that say Valley Water, SFPUC, other urban suppliers, you need to look a certain number of years out and basically on paper stress test your system to make sure that if this current drought or a future drought were to come and it's of a certain level of intensity, you need to be able to show the state that you have the supply, the infrastructure, and the investments necessary to weather that drought. Yes, taking local actions to reduce water use, which were mentioned a little bit earlier, but really being able to show that long-term resilience as a requirement for doing business with the state. But of course, that's not to say that our larger communities are by any means impervious to drought. I would never say that, of course, and to other risks. If whomever might be running the tech side of the show could put up the slide that I sent in earlier. Just want to mention a couple things related to what some of the particular vulnerabilities are to at least some of the larger urban suppliers. So what this map shows here is highlights San Jose and San Francisco, which I know is not necessarily the focus of this Senate District 13, but basically what that means is it's Valley water supply on the left and SFPUC water supply on the right side of the frame. And those are the two predominant sources of urban water for this district. So this is really looking at that part of the South Bay in combination. What this map shows is both the scale and the relative level of protection of the watershed lands upon which your water supply depends. So for example, on the left, what that's showing is that there's significant water supply from Valley Water Agency that is from the Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta watershed. So all of that green area is literally the watershed from which that part of your water supply comes from. And on the right-hand side is the complementary part, the water supply of SFPUC, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. The green highlighted area is the watershed of Yosemite Valley. Might be familiar to some of you. It's the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. The red line is the aqueduct that moves water from east to west into your service area. And I wanted to flash the screen up on the slide, this slide up on the screen here for a moment because it highlights a couple things for me. A lot of things actually, but a couple things come to mind for the purposes of this conversation. Wildfires, wildlife species conflicts, variability in snowpack, the types of things that can be exacerbated and really exposed through drought across these large landscapes, especially wildfires. Fewer wildfires so far this year, but by no means did we escape clean. There's a lot of stress out there in the system, a lot of communities heavily impacted this year, but looking at back a number of years, huge acreages. Each one of those wildfires, to the extent that they happen in the supply watersheds for our urban supply portfolios, there are significant downstream impacts, water quality, water supply security. Wildlife species conflicts I mentioned can oftentimes trigger regulatory impingements on your local agency's ability to secure water, and also variability in snowpack, something we'll cover in a minute here. From year to year, large variability and increasing variability across our state. So all these things need to be taken into consideration. It's not just about what happens in district or within the service area. of a water supplier. It's really about the broader landscape. And it gets back very specifically, Senator Becker, to something you mentioned earlier, which I really appreciate, which is we are all in this together. There are unifying factors across, unifying variables and forces across so much of what we do as Californians, and water supply, and in particular drought response, is certainly one of those. We share these watersheds, we all rely upon them, and we need to be asking ourselves constantly at the state level, local level, federal level, private level, are we investing in these watersheds, in the protection of them? Are we taking that into consideration when we make important decisions? You can drop the slide now. Thank you for doing that. Something else I want to mention is the confluence with stressors completely unrelated to drought. So there's the Anderson Dam within this district, and part of Valley Water System, a very important water supply reservoir, is currently basically offline because it's needing seismic retrofitting. That is not necessarily drought related, of course. It's related to making sure that it is not vulnerable to the kinds of earthquakes that the Bay Area is prone to. But when you have drought overlapping in time with things like this that take major pieces of water supply infrastructure offline, you get an increased kind of exponential rate of impact during drought times, basically the worst time that you can do that. Okay, just looking at my notes here. Also, of course, want to mention, I'll try to move through this quickly, is that each of these drought-related and non-drought-related, like the Anderson Dam issue related to seismic retrofitting, each of those challenges is absolutely further exposed and exacerbated by the effects of climate change. So while climate change was once something we talked about in the future, it will be here someday. Yes, let's do everything we can, but it's this thing out there. Not true. It is no longer the future boogeyman that it once was. Climate change is here. This week is certainly a visceral reminder of that, but it goes far beyond a limited term heat wave. We're seeing massive change across the entire hydrologic cycle. It's certainly waking us all up and needs to continue waking us all up to the realities of what we're facing as Californians. There's lots of metrics that we can use to track the impacts of climate change, what that really means. And one that's really interesting and coming out of research done by the Desert Institute and various universities across the UC system is looking at evapotranspiration, basically the rate at which water in soils moving through plants to keep them alive and crops, very important, water that's in lakes and rivers is literally being drawn up into the increasingly warm atmosphere, increasingly hot, as it were, atmosphere. Turns out that evapotranspiration is being lost at an increasing and I would argue alarming rate to what's being called atmospheric thirst. Literally, a warmer atmosphere is demanding more water from the planet. California is not alone in this, but we are experiencing an outsized change in this dynamic. And what that means, and what these researchers are finding, is that by 2040, give or take, around 10% of California's current water supply could literally be unavailable to us because of these increased atmospheric demands for water, driven largely by heat, but other factors as well. So what are we doing about this? In the short term, Senator Becker, you mentioned this, much appreciated. Huge appropriations coming through my department, other sister agencies, trying to move those dollars out the door as quickly as possible. We can come back into that. I don't want to spend too much time there, but lots of money being moved more quickly than we ever have before. So some big successes, including some good investments in your district. In parallel, the governor just came out with a water supply strategy document, really being very specific about regulatory changes, investments, and others across the water supply sector that we are committed to making. What you all can do as residents, look both inside your homes, outside your homes. Turns out that outdoor water use is by far, what's generally more than half of the residential sector's water use is outdoor landscape watering. So taking that seriously, asking yourself what you can do to contribute to the efforts of your local supply agency to weather this drought. Related to this, I'd say it's time to really rethink the wonders of the almighty and I would say somewhat sacrosanct green lawn. It's time to transition our landscapes, whether they be municipal or private, wherever possible, to natives, water-wise plants. It can be expensive, but the state's working with your agency and others to provide financial incentives to make that make that more possible. So I'll stop there. Thanks for any extra time I might have stolen there. Appreciate that. It's certainly a topic near and dear to my heart, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have a number of questions. I'm going to look at questions that were pre-submitted in first, but if there's any in the chat that you also would like to address or could address, that would be great.
Sure.
There's some very specific ones. There's one question about what's the plan to expand water collection and reservoir development? Is the state getting infrastructure funding from the Build Back Better legislation? Any of that funding help for water collection and reservoirs?
Yeah, we certainly expect it to. There's a lot of work being done to make sure that California's fair share of Build Back Better, also the Inflation Reduction Act recently passed by Congress and signed by the president, make their way back to California. So we're working hard on that. Number of different groups within the state administration, all the way up to the governor's office. I also say that we're continuing to make sure that dollars that were made available a while back, a number of years back, in Proposition 1, I believe, at the state level, continue to be invested in the very few but good surface reservoir projects that are on the books. So certainly pushing on multiple fronts there, Senator.
Okay. Just a couple of people asked, Julian and Kelly both asked, should we increase surface storage capacity for farmers to capture heavy rainfall events? I'm not sure. I don't know if does that make sense to you as a question?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And there's a lot of nuance here. I would just say really quickly, a couple of the reservoirs I just mentioned that are already slated to receive significant state funds will have benefit to, at least in part, the agricultural economy. I'd also say that there was something in that question about high flows. So it turns out with climate change, yes, we will likely see less snowpack, but not necessarily less precipitation. And so the trick is going to be, how do we capture those high flood flows and move it strategically onto farm fields, onto open spaces where it can then, like it once did before we levied the Central Valley system for flood protection, allow those waters to percolate down into our groundwater basins, multiple public benefits, wildlife benefits, water supply, groundwater sustainability, flood protection. So some really good work being done there, all up and down the system, to really capture the water when we have it, which is going to be at different times than in the past.
Got it. And lastly, we get asked, is water usage being considered as housing development increases through the state? I mean, do you feel we have enough water to continue to build housing and meet some of the state housing goals?
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly important to recognize that we are a growing state, and we need to provide housing, homes, communities, neighborhoods, and certainly along with all of that, secure water supplies for that growing population of Californians. A lot of work being done on increased density of our urban areas and other places that are really important. You know, one anecdote is always, I think, useful to use, and that is that, you know, over the last number of years, the population of Los Angeles has grown by over 1 million people, and their water supply, or rather their water usage in total, has not grown. And so there are very discrete and important examples of where Californians have, through efficiency, allowed themselves to grow economically while not depending on more water. And we can do that beyond, and we are doing that beyond Southern California, in the Bay Area in particular. Okay,
great. And maybe other innovations like Epic Clean Tech we'll hear about will help us do that further. Well, good. I'm going to move on, but thank you very much. And please stick around if we have time for additional questions at the end. And I'd now like to bring forward Dr. Nusha Jami, as we mentioned, Chief Development Officer for Research in the Earth and Environmental Sciences area at the Lawrence Berkeley Labs. She's also mayoral appointee to the San Francisco PUC, serves on the National Academy's Water Science and Technology Board, and non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, sits on several advisory boards. She received her PhD in civil and environmental engineering from UC Irvine. Thank you for being here with us today. Why don't you go ahead and make your remarks, and then I'll go ahead and ask you some questions.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Happy to share my slides. So I'm going to quickly walk through these. Can you see them?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to talk a little bit from a different angle, maybe to complement what Chris mentioned. As Senator Becker said very nicely at the beginning, we live in a world that's defined by our 19th century laws, 20th century infrastructure, and 21st century challenges. And obviously, the system we depend on, which is a very complex centralized system, has actually created water security for us for a century already. Brings water from far distances. We depend on these centralized large infrastructure, pipes and pumps that many of us never ever see. And it's a once true and linear system. It sort of has created this sense of water abundance. And we have actually, the utilities have worked very hard to secure water supply for their customers, especially in urban areas, at any cost to make sure they can have water reliability. We basically put water in three buckets. We put water supply, so bringing water to you. You use it, it leaves your home. It's collected by the wastewater systems and treated and put back in the environment. And in the middle, we have floodwater management and stormwater management, which is sort of how fast can we capture as any water that falls in our cities and grab it, clean it, and put it back in the environment, sort of treating it as a nuisance. This system is very much built as a top-down system. As customers, you probably pay your bill every other month, and you might not necessarily much think about the details that goes into bringing water to you. And it has certainly enabled growth and economic development in California and across the U.S. Something that I always find fascinating is this study was done by a team of researchers at the University of Illinois. They asked a number of people to draw what they think the water systems look like. And as you can see, there are some people who have deep understanding of the system, but there are also people who think that magic happens. Water comes to your tap, you use it, it leaves. God knows where it goes. So, as long as it's coming out of the tap, you're comfortable with the system. And I think that is actually at the heart of some of the problems we are facing today, and the concept of fluff that Senator Becker brought up earlier that I often mention. The water sector, actually, as you all know, is facing many modern challenges. And it's not just a California problem, but at least in California, we are in the past 20 years, we have been experiencing more extreme droughts, more extreme flooding events, wildfires, hotter droughts, which actually is quite a new thing for us in California, causing much more evaporation and evapotranspiration. Last year, actually, we lost a lot of our snowpack due to sublimation, which is basically the snow directly evaporates rather than flowing and through the rivers and into our reservoirs. We are experiencing urbanization. Many people are moving to urban areas. Globally, we're expected by 2050, 68% of the population to live in urban areas. And that means that we need to build homes and houses for these people, which is a challenge and an opportunity. Obviously, we're facing a lot of aging infrastructure. We just mentioned the Anderson Dam and the fact that we have to deal with the seismicity issues there. But many of our water systems old and aging and needs to be replaced or are reaching the end of their lifetime. And we have a lot of competing environmental needs. We are realizing we need to protect the ecosystem if we wanted to have a healthy system that we can live within. So the idea is, how do we transition to this 21st century world that we need to live in order to face our 21st century challenges? And the argument here is you have to have more distributed solutions across the board. We are going to depend on these centralized systems that we have. We live based on what we have, because a lot of us are living in areas that depends on those systems, and the populations have sort of settled in different areas because of access to that kind of imported water. But as we move forward, we have to rethink how we are doing this. And distributed water solutions are going to be the way to move forward to create more flexibility, resiliency, and reliability. Think about water reuse, recycling, stormwater capture, conjunctive use, taking the water and putting it underground, which came up. I'm going to move away from using efficiency and conservation, and I actually would say we have to focus on demand management. We are doing it in energy. We have to do it in water sector. And that demand management goes beyond conservation and efficiency. And then also trying to use different kind of, ultimately using this technology of desalination to desalinate brackish water and other water sources that we have in order to meet demand. Many of you know this, but I wanted to highlight this one more time. So when you're thinking about water use in our homes, overall, we use about 50 to 60% of our water outdoors and the rest of it indoors. And then if you focus on only what we do in the indoors, you can see that we use majority of water in flushing toilets and showering or washing machines. And one thing I want you to think about when you're looking at this pie chart is how many of these water uses that you have requires high quality water. And if you think about it very seriously, the only time that you really need high quality water to do your activities or essential needs is drinking and cooking and potentially showering and brushing teeth. Otherwise, you don't need to drink, you don't need the quality drinkable water to flush your toilets or to water your outdoor spaces. And this linear system I mentioned at the beginning actually, unfortunately, sort of re-emphasizes that. We treat water to the highest quality, we bring it to your home, and you use it for every purpose that you have with that quality. And that's a serious inefficiency we have in our system. So what can we do? And many of you have thought about or heard about purple pipes that you can actually treat water and bring it to homes or businesses to use it for outdoor spaces. However, I want to change this mindset and maybe shift to a different kind of thinking. I would say we have to actually build the building blocks of the 21st century, meaning start at the smallest building block, which is homes and buildings, and think about how we can use and reuse water multiple times before it leaves our home. How can we use the shower water to flush toilet? How can we use shower water or laundry water to water outdoor spaces? Yes, let's get rid of our lawns, which is obviously unnecessary for the Mediterranean climate that we have here. However, even if you have a native landscaping, you still need to water it once in a while. So the question is, what kind of water you use for that, or what kind of water you use for flushing your toilet? So that would be the building scale treatment. How can we install some of this? I'm sure Aaron is going to go and speak about that. Then the second step of this is, how can we do this at the neighborhood scale? Maybe we can actually have reuse systems that are set in the neighborhood scales and can distribute reuse at different places for outdoor spaces or different purposes that we have. Then it's a smaller system and large plants. So why do I sort of focus on this way? Because remember, if you use less water in your home, imagine if you take your water from your shower and create a storage system and use it for flushing toilets, all of a sudden your water use in your home reduces by 30%. That's why demand management is the word for the 21st century rather than conservation and efficiency, because as we are building these new buildings, we can reduce the amount of water we take out of the environment and use it for different purposes. And as we're building these systems on top of each other, our dependence on the natural systems can reduce, and actually our carbon footprint can reduce as well. So just to wrap this up, think about the 20th century model we have. Water comes in, we use it once, we take it away, we put it back in the environment. The 21st century model is going to be incorporated a lot of distributed systems within it. We will take less from the environment. We can basically create storage spaces that takes water when it rains, when it snows, when we have extreme events. and then try to use and reuse that water for different purposes at different times. Stormwater capture and reuse, using and reusing water in our homes, in our buildings, reusing water for industrial use, and then ultimately the amount of water the rest of this goes to the wastewater treatment plants, retreated and reused again and put back to the system. So this can be a circular economy for water that's much more hybrid and actually does not depend highly to the centralized system and quite uncertain system that we have, and reduce demand ultimately. Just going to wrap it up here, and happy to take, I know we're going to have some discussions around this, but one thing I want to highlight, we have done this in an energy sector. If you think about it, solar panels 30 years ago were a novelty. Now they're in everybody's roof. We are going to drive more electric cars in the next decade than we used to in the 20 years ago. We are installing a charging station in every corner of cities and communities in order to enable this transition we are having to EV and electric cars. We are building batteries to make sure we can use energy in different times. Why can't we do that with water? We absolutely can do this with water. So we have to be more innovative, and we have to think bottom up as we are thinking about how we want to rethink and reimagine our water system, and how we want to build a resilient water future. And we have to do this not just when the drought hits, but actually when we have wet years, because that is the opportunity area for us. We need to make sure we capture and reuse and store as much as water we can during the wet years. Then we can actually use that as a storage, as a sort of banked water for ourselves during the dry years that we are experiencing more and more of. With that, I can stop sharing. Hope I did not go over my time, but
No, that was great. It was great, as always. So a lot of questions. Hopefully Elizabeth, who's a teacher, asked how she can teach her students in school about water scarcity problems and how to change our habits to conserve water. I was thinking maybe some of your slides, if we can make them available, would be helpful to
absolutely
to do that. Any other thoughts? Do you ever speak to kids and try to kind of make this understandable to them?
Look, I think that's an absolutely great question, partly because this mindless reaction we have to our water. And I tell you, in my own household, you don't wake up in the morning and go to bed always thinking about water, because it's coming out of your tap at every time. So sometimes it's this disconnect we have from our watershed, from our water system, is really not helping. So trying to not only educate students and kids, but also adults is going to be key. And some of the work we did during the last drought actually showed the media outreach and all the articles that have been written about the water system that we had was extremely helpful to people to better connect to their water system and realize the gravity of the challenges we are facing. So I think that is key, but happy to there are lots of fantastic educational pieces that are being produced by water utilities, by actually Water Education Foundation that's focusing on education, and that can be used for teaching these issues to kids and grown-up kids like us, adults who actually use water every day.
Yeah, David A. just wrote in, it has to be really behavioral shift, taking out lawns, not flushing toilets until necessary, saving gray water. I know that we have taken out our lawn now fully. We did it in pieces, and our small lawn, peninsula lawn, and we have if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. That we actually kept, honestly, from the last drought. We just kind of kept that up at our household. But Thornton also asked about that, and dishwasher versus hand wash came up. Only run the dishwasher, washing machine when they're full, unless you have a special setting. Take short showers, use a nozzle for outdoor water use. Consider replacing old toilets, and new toilets are much more efficient. About Yeah, they're about 4x more efficient, according to the data that I have here. So those
One-
are some.
One
So go
quick
ahead.
thing I would say there, I think, we often don't think about data and information technology when it comes to water. We have all this information around how much energy we use for every device that we have in our homes, but we don't have that much detailed information on water because we have really fallen behind when it comes to metering water use.
Yeah.
And metering at a fine scale to better understand how we are using our water. I think that earlier question you asked about education, your Nest sends you, if you have a Nest in your home, sends you email every week, tells you how you used your water, right? How you use energy. We need the same technologies when it comes to water. We have to be a lot more mindful when it comes to how we use water. And I think reducing leaks, rethinking how we use water in the homes, metering water at every scale is going to be essential to move us forward.
Well, I agree with that. Absolutely. I've been involved with the company early on based on people write about, hotels and resorts and why aren't they doing more? Some people wrote in on that. We really started a company. It was one of the early funders around the research professor Cialdini, who writes about influence. What messages actually get people to conserve, say, when you're in a hotel or in other situations. And this company was aimed at electricity. How do you compare people to their neighbors and use that as a lever to get people to reduce energy? And I know folks worked on that also for water, but it was harder for some reason. I think it was the measurement issue. And, for many years, we didn't even have, and there are still places that have no meters in California. We're phasing that in over a period of years.
Yes.
And that needs to be done quickly. And people do ask about agriculture. If you have any comments, certainly something we deal with. We had a bill this year on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and that's really the central act that's around the agriculture use, although there's certainly lots of room for innovation. And way back when I was sort of doing social venture, we saw folks working on that, trying to help farmers use less water using weather prediction and other things, certainly drip irrigation technology, and other things that they can use. I'll ask this to you and to Aaron. Rebecca asked about what really should our goals be. A number of people brought up Israel recycling 95% of its water, and partly that's different systems. But what are our goals? I mean, she mentioned 10%. I've heard sort of like that's where are we at now, I think, is at 10% recycling, and that really our 2030 goal, kind of the audacious but also maybe achievable goal, is really 20% to sort of double that. And I think Aaron's one that's told me that, so we'll ask him that in a minute. But do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say we can set recycling goals that are higher than that if we actually start from the bottom up. I think I really do believe we have to think, when it comes to recycling, we have to think about sort of these building blocks of recycling, because I would really be disappointed to see 20 years, 30 years from now, we have a centralized recycling plant that actually does not have enough water to treat, right? So we don't want to build stranded assets. We want to build strategically. And to build strategically, we have to think about how we are developing and how new homes that we are building, how more efficient they can be, how much more efficient they can be, how can they use water less, and then gradually build upon that before we get to building infrastructure at a centralized scale. Two things I'll leave you with, I think, and I'm going to touch on Israel too. In Denmark, people use 22 gallons per person per day. We use, in San Francisco, we use about 40 gallons per person per day. In the peninsula, I think the last numbers I looked was about 70 gallons per person per day. It might have come down a little bit. So we still have a long way to go, 22 gallons per person per day being the bar, if that's where we want to go. And then the second thing I would say, on Israel, I think they have had all of the above kind of approach. So they did conservation and efficiency, and then they started thinking about, okay, so if we reduce our water use to a significant amount, so then what else do we need to marginally improve our reliability? And then they built upon that. So I think it is extremely important to be strategic as we are doing this. It's not good to kind of look at one location with one number, but actually see what else they did to make sure they don't end up overbuilding or outsizing their system and dealing with the financial cost of that. So I think that is extremely important when you're thinking about recycling and reuse. And I think that's why that demand management piece is important, because recycling and reuse at the building scale and at the neighborhood scale can actually be part of our demand management strategy, the same way solar panels are part of our demand management strategy, right? So you have to think about it this way: we are producing at a smaller scale.
Yeah, got it. Let's see, Peter wrote about price increases, drastic increases that we're seeing, and what are the causes. I think the causes have become clear from this discussion. I will note that we did put money in the budget to help people who are struggling with water and electricity bills, and contact our office if you fall into that category. We're certainly trying to help lower-income households, which is part of Peter's question. Is it hitting them hard? I'll throw three somewhat related questions at you as a maybe final question, and we'll bring you in and then come back up. With the whole group, questions around residential gray water, and are there easy ways to get dishwater and bathwater into a garden that won't damage plants? So that's one you can think about. Two, collecting and distributing storm and rainwater, kind of other public works project or on an individual basis. And then three, on housing, again, we heard from Chris a good example of LA increasing their population by 1 million people and not increasing water use. But there's a question, I don't know, does the state's RENA goals, which have asked each of our cities to meet very high goals this year, does that take into account water, or are we, again, are you confident we have enough water to do that and fund that, to supply those new buildings? So I'll throw all those at you, and you can choose
Sure.
against.
I think I'm going to start from the price. I think that's key. You actually had a bill that was passed on decoupling water rates. I think that was really, really a great piece of legislation that passed. But water use is generally water bills are built on volumetric water use. But remember, it doesn't matter if you use a cup of water or a pool water, we still need to run the pipes and the pumps and pay for people to make sure you have reliable, clean water coming out of your tap. So we have fixed costs that need to be covered. And that is key to, under no circumstances, that fixed cost to be impacted, because that means then the utilities have to let some of the maintenance or the things that they need to do to maintain their system in a healthy level to go. And that's not what you want. You want to make sure you have a healthy system operating at all times. Then on top of that is the variable cost, which is how much water you use, which impacts the amount of energy we use or material we use to make sure it's clean and comes out of your tap. And that variable cost absolutely needs to be tagged to how much water individuals are using. Unfortunately, that is not the system we have right now in California, but we are hoping to get into, they call that decoupling rates. And what you see that the rates are going up is partly because utilities are charging volumetric rates. And as people reduce their water use, they have to somehow recover that fixed cost, and they end up increasing their cost. So that's one thing. Then comes down to helping people to pay for their bills, which is super important. Partly goes back to metering. Again, we don't have individual metering system. There are like multi-unit buildings, HOAs, often pay for your water, or they actually are the ones who manage the meter. They're not individual water meters when you have multi-unit buildings. So it's sometimes very difficult to reach people who cannot afford paying for the water bills, because we don't have a direct connection between utility and an individual user. So there is a lot of effort going on at the legislature right now to help those people and find different ways of distributing that resources, which I know utilities are sort of working very hard to make that happen. But going back to metering, I think that is going to be the important part of this process. On gray water use and gray water reuse, going back to rates, which I think is important, is remember the utilities are built based on these centralized water systems. So as people get off the grid gradually, or basically partially get off the grid, they use less water, and they actually impact the amount of water comes that the centralized system needs to produce. So utilities, the business model is not this. So they're still going through this gradual change. Again, energy sector did that. They have gone through this. They are now finally embracing some of these centralized solutions. But water sector hasn't yet. So, and that's why you see there's not enough resources out there to help people to embrace these distributed systems on on-site reuse or gray water reuse. But I think gradually they're coming. San Francisco has been a leader in this. We actually have an ordinance in place. Every building that's 100,000 square foot or higher has to have an on-site reuse system. Anyway, I think it's really, really important issues, all of this, and happy to further pick it up as we have a broader discussion later. Thank you.
Great. Last piece on the arena piece. Do you feel again that we have the sufficient water, especially if we implement some of these things? Do you feel we have sufficient water to meet those numbers that are coming down from the state?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just it is just a matter of how we manage our system ultimately, and on the resource side, we need to make sure we are actually not just investing on centralized solutions. We also have enough resources that goes to smaller distributed solutions and helping individuals who cannot pay for their water bill. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. We'll now switch up and go to Aaron. Aaron, as I mentioned, Aaron Tartakovsky is an entrepreneur and co-founder of Epic Clean Tech, which is a water startup. So represents the innovation, more of the innovation on this panel. Prior to career sustainability, worked in federal politics, remained active in affecting public policies on local, state, and national level. Speaks frequently, as I know, on urban water management at universities and industry gatherings. Sorry, doing some adjustment here. And recently co-authored Design Professionals Water Reuse Guide, a project that was funded, I believe, by Google and others to help accelerate water reuse for the green building industry. So thank you, Aaron. This is very much from my heart. And actually, if you could say, one of the initiatives I was involved in was Imagine H2O, which has been a big source of kind of promoting innovation and entrepreneurship in water. And I know you've been involved somewhat, or maybe even played a role in EPICS. Maybe you can tell us about that. That's a nonprofit, by the way, supporting entrepreneurship and innovation. But I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of how you came to the space. Tell us obviously what you do, what the company does. I think it pertains certainly to the regulations that Nusha just talked about. But tell us about what you do and a little bit, again, how you were drawn to this area. And then I'll probably ask you, if you don't mention it, but what's it like to be, certain spaces are harder to innovate in than others. So what's it like to innovate in this space? So go ahead.
Well, the last question is the easiest answer, is that every day working in wastewater is the best day ever. So we have a lot of fun, and thank you, Senator Becker, for bringing us all together. For those in attendance here, Nusha and Chris really are luminaries in the industry. So it's exciting to have them here, sort of really speaking from a high level on everything that we're dealing with the state. The things that we're doing here in California really are the model for what many parts of the world are doing. So these conversations, which are happening in real time, is exciting, because I think we are.
I was going to mention, you mentioned that, this, I think, we've actually gained viewers as we've gone along, even at the hour mark, which I've never seen before. So obviously we're keeping people's attention. I appreciate all the things that are coming in. Sorry, back over to you.
No, absolutely. No, so just look, we're sort of at this exciting pivotal moment in the water industry as a whole. And to sort of do the fastest recap ever of water history, many of the design principles we use today are the same ones developed by the Romans, and the aqueduct systems, and many of the water and wastewater treatment design principles of centralized systems with pipes moving water and wastewater. These have been around for 250 years. And what we're dealing with now is this moment where we're using tech, we're using sort of new ways of thinking to kind of fundamentally rethink how we've done things for the last 200 years. There's not very many industries that haven't changed in 200 years. And there's sort of this reckoning happening for all the reasons that Nusha mentioned: aging infrastructure, urban population growth, a changing climate. So I'll talk about a little bit about that and what we're doing at Epic Clean Tech. My background, just to expand on your intro, Senator, I have a very non-traditional route to water. I mean, if we really want to go back, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then throughout high school, I wanted to be a chef, and then in college, I was flirting with becoming a rabbi, and then I went into federal politics, and now I am a glorified plumber, dealing with wastewater treatment and reuse. So all over the place, but I think, frankly, why that's relevant is that I kind of have a sort of an outsider's perspective to how our systems work. You know, I, like most people walking on the street, kind of lived in a flush and forget society. And Nusha touched upon this, but you know, when we flush the toilet, we assume things are just going to go away. And when we turn on the tap, we just assume water is going to come out, and that's great. You know, it's a marvel of modern engineering that our systems work like that. But you know, I think because we don't know so much about how these systems work, there isn't the same public, there isn't the public attention we need on these systems. And obviously that's changing when we have shocks to the system like we are. You know, we're now in what, 7 years out of the last 10 of drought. And so I think it's hitting people in a way that it hasn't. It's hitting our farmers, it's hitting our ranchers, it's hitting, you know, the average homeowner, it's hitting industry, wineries and breweries, super water intensive, it's hitting semiconductors and data centers. You know, the data centers that power basically the entire world and this technology we're using right now, the average data center uses the same amount of water as a 50,000 person city. Everything touches water. We know so little about it. And I think, you know, it needs to change. And it goes back to what you were talking about with education. You know, I've had the benefit of being able to read so many of the comments over the last hour. And I think there's a lot of amazing suggestions and there's a lot of really good ideas. Everything from, you know, the plants that we grow, you know, ornamental lawns to water reuse. And I think the answer is sort of what the solution is all of the above. You know, there is no one silver bullet that is going to solve something as massive as our water challenges in California and then more broadly in the Western states. So I think, you know, what we are very focused on at our company at Epic Clean Tech is on accelerating water reuse, starting in real estate. So buildings use, you know, anywhere from 12 to 14% of all potable water on the planet. Very few buildings reuse that water. And what's amazing is that we have the technologies to do this. You know, we've been sending people into space for decades. And as I often remind people, you know, what do you think the astronauts are drinking? You know, there's a very finite amount of water up there. It is recycled. Now, it doesn't take NASA technology to do a lot of what we're trying to do. But a lot of what has sort of blocked these types of approaches from gaining more traction is some of it is regulatory. You know, we're always focused on protecting public health. That's the sort of the paramount consideration whenever you're doing water reuse. So how do we make sure that if we're going to do it, we do it safely? And part of it is sort of what we call in the industry the yuck factor. And again, this was touched upon sort of earlier, but we are uncomfortable oftentimes with the notion of recycled water. We've been conditioned to think, sort of as Nusha mentioned, this linear approach. We use it once, we get rid of it. So all of a sudden, when you have companies or new regulations that are saying, actually, we're going to reuse it and reuse it and reuse it, it makes people, well, uncomfortable. That's what we've been taught to do. And so I think it's a lot of different factors at play, but I think fundamentally the way we think, you know, at Epic Clean Tech and sort of more broadly in the industry is that in the 21st century, with all of the technological capabilities at our disposal, we should not have to rely on whether or not it rains to know if we'll have enough water supply for our communities. We just shouldn't. We have a lot of tools at our disposal and we need to accelerate them faster. And a lot of that is happening. You know, as I said, having the benefit of going after everyone, I took out a lot of slides because a lot of what I was going to go over is covered. So let me just very, very quickly touch upon what water recycling in a building actually looks like. So as was referenced, San Francisco is now the first city in the country to actually require that all new large buildings have to have on-site water recycling in place. And this is not some sort of theoretical thing. This is happening now in real time. Our company, as an example, is operating the first gray water reuse system in a large building. This is a 39-story building with 550 apartments that is reusing about 7,000 gallons a day, which translates to about 2.5 million gallons a year. And just to reframe that, that is 2.5 million less gallons that this building now has to pull in from our city municipal supply, and instead is generating its own water right on site for things like flushing toilets, for things like irrigation. As Nusha mentioned, we don't need to use drinking water to flush our toilets. We can use this still very highly treated, purified water for all sorts of non-potable applications, whether it's toilet flushing in urinals, whether it's cooling towers. Cooling towers use a huge amount of water to cool our buildings, laundry. There's a lot of different things we can do. I think very quickly, we hear gray water, we hear black water, rainwater, stormwater. I just wanted to toss this up just to sort of level set so we all have the same definitions. When we talk about gray water, we are referring to water that is not contaminated by organics, whether that's human organics, say from human waste in a toilet, or food organics, which is coming from things like dishwashers or kitchen sinks. So just want to make sure everyone sort of understands a lot of these definitions, and we can kind of come back to this later on. We are big proponents of transitioning the language from wastewater treatment to resource recovery. Wastewater is this really interesting term because it evokes this sense that it's dirty, it's waste, we get rid of it. We actually believe that there is no such thing as wastewater. There is only wasted water. And so we're part of this movement. It's not just us, it's the industry as a whole, transitioning to resource recovery, which is to say wastewater, what is it? What is it comprised of? Really, it's just water, it's organics, it's all of these different things that we can actually recapture and then repurpose. So in the case of what we're trying to do, we are taking this building wastewater that we would normally send off into the sewer, we're turning it into clean water that we can then recycle. We're turning it into soil, like literally taking the organics out of the water and turning it into high quality organic soil products. So then, creating nice hardy plants that are sequester more carbon from the atmosphere and energy. There's a huge amount of energy potential in our wastewater, whether it's the heat that is in the water, whether it's actually in the organics in the water that can then repurpose for energy. Just to give a sense of what these systems look like, these are not big wastewater treatment plants. These are going into 8.5-foot basements in the middle of downtown San Francisco. In the case of this top building here, nestled right between the Uber and Twitter headquarters in downtown San Francisco. So again, not theoretical, this is happening in real time. Again, I like to show people what it looks like. That is before and after. That water on the right is crystal clear. It doesn't smell. You would have no idea that it's recycled water. Now, by regulation, right now, we are not allowed to drink it. Scientifically, it is drinkable, but there are regulators on the call. So I have to be firm that we are not drinking that water. And then this is what we can do with soil products. So this is all planted with organics that we can pull from wastewater. Again, this whole notion of moving us away from waste to resource recovery. That toilet on the far right is not a stock image. That is actually planted with recovered wastewater organics from Stanford University and a building about 2 blocks away from where this photo was taken. So again, it's really just kind of rethinking the way we've done things for the last 200 years. There's a huge amount of work being done on this whole notion of resource recovery. These are actual projects right now where these systems are being implemented. These are all throughout California. And again, this was all possible because of forward-thinking regulators, of smart policies, which are making sure that these systems are done and they're done safely. Because again, that's the sort of the paramount concern for anyone who's going to be doing these types of systems. But again, this is not just San Francisco. It's not just the Bay Area. We are seeing these types of water recycling programs popping up in cities throughout California and frankly, around the country and around the world. We have now delegations of water officials coming from all over the world to come and study what we are doing here in California, in the Bay Area, in districts like this one, like the Senator's District. So I think with that, I might be on my time. I'm sure there'll be all sorts of questions about the technology and how these different things work. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do here is transition people away from this notion that we use water once and that's it. We can do a lot more. And in many ways, it's sort of like the next frontier of recycling.
Well, thank you. That was great. It has spurred a lot of question discussion. I just want to note very clearly what you said, which we don't hear often: forward-thinking regulators and smart policies. So that is music to my ears. We don't often hear it. And I think the definitions, first of all, were very helpful. We probably should have done it at the beginning, but I appreciate your definitions around gray water and black water, love resource recovery. Because when you say wastewater, yeah, just certain people just tune out. So I think that's very helpful. And also wanted to note one pickup from what Nusha said. We did pass the bill that I co-authored around, as principal co-author on water decoupling. So that gets to some of the use questions a lot of people have had. Why aren't we charging people more who are using more? What are we doing about that? And that will help if we decouple utility profits from water use. Then that creates the right incentives so they can send the right market signals then to individuals as well. We also have many, many, many water utilities, which might be another topic for another day. But now that you've done, 1 billion of others does it keep getting easier and easier? Does the technology kind of evolve? And what do you think is next? Just kind of getting more and more of these units out there?
Yeah, I think it's a combination that the technology is going to continue to get better and better over time. I mean, look at the early computers. They took up a full room, and now we have the same technology in our cell phones that was sending the first astronauts up to space. So the technology is going to get better, although the technology that we have is extremely advanced already. So I'd say technology really is just one small part of the puzzle. Much more is the regulatory landscape. And I'll let me use San Francisco as an example. People have wanted to recycle water for years and decades, but I think part of what blocked these types of new technologies from coming to the market is that the regulatory landscape, how do you actually get this thing permitted, was unclear. So if I'm a building owner, I'm a developer, and I want to put a water recycling system in my building that's going to recycle 75% of the water, I need to go to the Department of Building Inspection. I need to go to the Department of Public Health. I need to go to the water wastewater utility, in the case of San Francisco, the SFPC. I need to get sign off from every single one of them. If all of these agencies aren't on the same page as to sort of what these systems need to look like, how do we monitor, how do we regulate them, how do we make sure that they're protecting public health, then they're never going to permit any of these systems to go in. And I think that is why the regulations passed in San Francisco and the city and county of San Francisco are so important, because they create that framework, that playbook for a building owner, a developer, an architect, an engineer to come say, okay, we want to do on-site reuse, and this is this clear step-by-step process by how we do it. And we're not going to mess up the project timeline by trying to sort of cowboy this one and figure it out. And I think that's what's so critical. The technology we have, and it's going to get better, but the technology we have, it's about creating that regulatory framework, things that I know, for example, you are championing, that are going to make these types of technologies explode. And I think, again, looking at something like solar, PV technology was around for a very long time, but really what allowed the solar industry to explode was interesting business models, solar finance, different ways to actually deploy this and remove that upfront capital expenditure. And it was, different regulatory landscapes that encouraged it, that incentivized it, that gave rebates for it. And so I think, when it comes to water reuse and a lot of these water technology projects, we are where, solar was 15 years ago. So we're catching up. We got a lot of work to do. But that's kind of how we see this market really developing.
Yeah. Again, lots of comments. Sorry, we're not going to get to them all. I do see Pat. I'll mention Pat Showalter, because she's a councilwoman in Mountain View, and she also is someone I turn to, a real expert in this issue. And she says, important to remember that geologically we're using the same water used by the dinosaurs, a small amount of water created during volcanic eruptions. So this is really the same water over and over. It only makes sense that we should add more recycling systems to that same water. just my own question. I mean, do you see more entrepreneurship in this space? I mean, is this, certain industries, again, I think this has been a tough one to innovate, partly because the regulatory support hasn't been there. Do you see now more entrepreneurship happening?
100%. I think you referenced already Imagine H2O. It's one of the leading accelerators for early stage water companies. When I entered this industry about 8 years ago, that type of sort of innovative ecosystem didn't really exist in the same way that it does today. When anyone driving around in the Bay Area, you drive around, you see billboards for every single tech company out there, and they're doing interesting things with software and everything else. And there's so much investment, there's so much focus going into that space. We didn't really see that same level of focus in sort of this, what I broadly define as climate tech, and specifically with water. Now there's just been an absolute explosion of water innovation. You see some of the biggest companies in the world who now have dedicated innovation arms. You see accelerators like Imagine H2O starting to become more prominent, starting to go global. There's, I think when I started, there was, a handful of water accelerators. Now there's, I think at least over a dozen all around the world. So we do see it accelerating. And, look, I'll say again, broadly with climate tech, this used to be sort of a fringe thing. There was some investors who were really focused on this. Now, 14% of all new venture capital investment went into broadly defined climate tech. Water is still a smaller percentage of that, but it's changing fast, and it's changing because people are recognizing that these challenges are mounting. All of these things are coming to a head. And frankly, a lot of industry is feeling it. I mean, we are now working with some of the biggest, food and beverage companies in the world, because they have serious water supply issues that are threatening their ability to function. We're now working with one of the largest electric vehicle makers in the world because they can't build a factory without water. Water is essential to everything. We don't hear about it as much as we should, but all of these things are what is spurring a huge amount of innovation. So I think, we talk about all these daunting challenges. We talk about what's happening. I've, a child of immigrants and refugees to this country. I think I'm just ever optimistic about what we can do. So I think we have big challenges, but what I see in my vantage point, sort of in the trenches of the water innovation industry, is like there's a lot of amazing, important stuff that's already in the market and that's going to keep on coming to the market. So yes, keep on creating these incentives and these opportunities to invest in the new technologies so that, we can get the same level of support that all the apps and widgets get.
Yeah, no, that's music to my ears, certainly. It is obviously a global issue. So thanks for bringing that up as well. And I mean, what do you think as I set a goal out there, what do you think should be our 2030 goal for water reuse and recycling as a state?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to do a number. I think I'd want to meet with my team. I think frankly Nusha is a better person to ask to put a specific number there, because we are focused on a very specific subset right now. Yeah. We're focused on cities, we're focused on buildings. But look, I think a lot of people in the comments and even in the discussion, we've talked about Israel recycling somewhere in the realm of 90% of all the wastewater they produce. I think Spain as a country is somewhere in the 30%. The US is, I think, still hovering in the 10% range. So some people would look at that and say that's disappointing. Others like me would say, well, that just means we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of potential to do better. So I'll leave the specific numbers to my co-panelists. Okay, well, good. Well, I'll bring them back on in 1 second. I'll just mention, this is always very helpful for me and my team in looking at, what laws we want to pass next year or introduce, hopefully pass next year. John asked how the state can get all various agencies on the same page to move these reuse programs moving forward. As you mentioned, that was one of the big issues in San Francisco. And, that's something that I need to work on for sure. There's something called building performance standards, which sounds wonky, but is a really important goal setting that 2 states have now adopted around efficiency for buildings. Very powerful framework. And as my team looks at this now, we're looking to say, hey, can we include water in that? It's really only been used for energy efficiency. But as we have these building performance standards, is that something we can use? Actually, one question, while I bring up Nusha and Chris back on here, I'll ask you one question. Is this realistic that this technology eventually gets down to the home level? Do you think? So it's short answer is yes, it can eventually get down to the individual home level. But again, the big consideration there is going to be, how do we ensure that these systems are safe? When we put it into one big building, we have, a team of 3 people operating a system that is serving 1,000 or even more people. When you start to get to the individual home level, there's a lot more considerations just to make sure it's safe, to make sure that there are correct operations and maintenance. I think probably the easier step for a home is things like laundry to landscape, where you're just piping directly from your laundry into your landscape. I think even in your county, there's all sorts of resources. There's contractors who this is all they do, so they can kind of help guide individual homeowners. When you start talking about trying to recycle water at the home level back into your fixtures, into your laundry, it gets more complicated. We're not there yet. We don't have the regulatory framework to really see, the growth that you saw, for example, in rooftop solar. But it's certainly technologically speaking, yes, but I think there's a lot more factors at play. There are other steps, though. As I said, laundry to landscape is one that are going to have big returns, both in terms of cost savings as well as water savings for homeowners.
Great. Well, that's very helpful. And again, another sticks in my mind. You said 2.5 million gallons just from one building, that you're saving on an annual basis. That's a huge amount. So we have a few more minutes for general questions, and we had a lot of other ones. Maybe I'll just turn it over to you, both of you, to see if there's anything that's come up since you've spoken or came up in the chat that you would like to address. I'll also ask my team if they will, because this came up a lot of different ways, if they will send out after this, if we can put together a email with all the what are the incentives for these different programs, what are the resources, where do you go if you're interested in, say, to do what you just mentioned. I think the kind of the kitchen to garden piece. What are the things that are out there that can be helpful? Where how can we get support if people are having struggling with water bills? But we'll try to make sure we put that in a nice cogent form and get that out to all of you. Again, we have 2 different counties. One thing I will mention: someone said, "Hey, where do we stand in San Mateo County?" And the good news is people know the SFPUC, the Hetch Hetchy system, currently has approximately 4.5 years of supply left in the system, which provides most of San Mateo County. The reservoir behind me in this picture at Crystal Springs is part of that. So, even again, we have to conserve, but don't want people to think that we're running out tomorrow. Certainly that system has some good reserve. So anyway, Chris, and you should turn it over to you. Is there things that came up that you'd like to address?
Just one quick thought I have on the number that you are looking for. I would say we can have the same approach we had with renewable energy. We can say we'll want to have, there are certain standards we want to meet, and then allow regions to kind of innovate within their own boundaries, right? So then they can work together and figure out from bottom up how they can build different solutions, from recycling, reuse at every scale, to stormwater capture, to conservation and efficiency. Question came up that mentioned that if you want to do reuse in the home, you have to do double plumbing. Yes, absolutely you can. But remember, we are building new buildings every day. New neighborhoods are being developed every day. I actually have seen, I think Aaron has a very good, which one day I should get it from him, but he has this very interesting slide that shows we are building in Manhattan every day in the US or something like that. So imagine if every one of we are building future cities today, future buildings today. If we are building them with the standards we did everything 100 years ago, we're really not thinking. We're basically just reinforcing the failing system that we have, and you're just putting more and more pressure on it. So I think sort of trying to reimagine and rethink new development is going to be key. And then from there on, then the focus is going to be, how do you retrofit old buildings? How do you incentivize replacing some of these plumbings and reimagining how we sort of retrofit this in an effective way. So, and there are ways to do that. And the last thing I would say is, remember, your shower and your toilets are right next to each other. All you need is storage space that would redirect that water right directly to your toilet flushing. And they're actually almost use the same amount of water. So not just laundry to outdoors, but actually shower to toilet is another very easy fix. Obviously, it requires work and construction, but it's an easy fix potentially.
Yeah, good. Chris, anything that struck you that you wanted to follow up on?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat. There's several questions about this issue of price incentives for individuals to invest in certain technologies, and this question of, with water being relatively inexpensive, of course that's variable and not necessarily true in all areas, but it is a truism in some places. What's the incentive to invest in certain types of technologies? And I'll say it's a great question, and it's one worth diving more into. But I'll also say that the State Water Resources Control Board, within the next year or two, pursuant to recent legislation that was passed into law, is going to be developing for each of the 420 or 450 some odd urban agencies across the state new urban water supply standards that are individually tailored for each of those urban suppliers. And that is going to put significant pressure on at the individual agency level to invest in those very sorts of water efficiency technologies. So it's not necessarily a question of what's the incentive for the homeowner, it's what's the incentive for the public supplier to then turn around and make these sorts of innovation investments. And that's really exciting, in addition to all the other pieces, of course, that are part of that puzzle.
Great. That is very helpful. We're going to want to thank both of you and both for those comments. Thank all of you. I'll give you each maybe 30 minutes or 30 seconds or a minute to wrap up. And again, we will work on a wrap up email. And again, I want to thank our agencies as well that are working hard at this, BASCA, as well as the Santa Clara Valley Water District, who are working very hard and communicate with their staff and their boards often, who are trying to move us in the right directions. Final thought from each of you?
Sure, I can go first. Really just pleasure to be here. Senators, thanks so much for the invitation. Fellow panelists, really great to meet you and contribute. There's a lot of resources coming out of the state right now. We are taking full advantage with the legislature, their relative financially available year. And so a lot of money is being put on the table. Encourage yourselves and your local water agencies to reach out to DWR, get informed, and the State Water Board, get informed about dollars that are available. Apply. We want to make the biggest change possible. So thanks for your partnership.
Good. Thank you for that message. That's a very welcome message.
I'm happy to go next. If you're going in order, I also really appreciate you doing this. This is second year. And I really appreciate all the people who participated in the middle of the day. Obviously, it's a very important issue for people, and water security is going to be key. I think Garen mentioned this as well, which is, we can't live without water. So we actually really need to build a water resilient future for our region in order to, and in California, in order to be able to innovate in every sector of the industry. I think I would like to encourage everybody to think more creatively when it comes to water. We are not cornered into the system we have. We definitely do need policymakers and regulators that are willing to take the lead in this. And I really do appreciate, Senator Becker, that you have been trying to kind of take that lead. And I really do hope our region, as it's especially the Bay Area, as it's known for being, the leading edge of innovation. I think we can actually do the same thing with water, and I look forward to see how potentially we can shift this conversation from all the challenges we are facing to all the opportunities that are ahead of us, and how we can take advantage of that.
Excellent. Well said. Aaron.
Great. Well, Senator Becker, you said we had 30 minutes to close. Is that right? Yeah, look, I think first thing I'll say, Nusha, to your point earlier, the quote is, we are adding the rate at which we were adding new buildings to our global building stock is like we're building a new New York City every single month from now until 2060. So yes, there's a lot of opportunity to rethink how we build. I'll just say this, and I touched upon it earlier, but coming from a family of refugees, of immigrants to this country, the fact that we are able to have these types of meeting with our elected officials, and our elected officials, like you, Senator Becker, actually care, is extremely rare. It's something that I'm really grateful for in this country. And frankly, the only way we raise these issues up and actually address them is by having concerned citizens like everyone here coming and petitioning our elected officials, petitioning our government. So for everyone here, you could be doing a lot of things with your Thursday afternoon, but you chose to be here with us. So keep on sending emails, keep on making those calls, and keep on learning about these issues. The more we know, the more educated we are, the better informed we are to move things in a better direction.
Well, thank you. I'm learning a lot as well in this whole area, because you said, as we saw from Nusha's, the real graphic drawing, it is a very complicated area. It's much more complicated than you think, and I thought. And so I appreciate all of this. And if we didn't answer a question, when we get questions, we try to incorporate them into the town hall. So if you didn't get a question answered that you want answered specifically by my team, then please do write in again. And again, we will work to get that summary out as well. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all who tuned in and will watch this later, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.